Three stand-up for the gray area team. It's Friday, May the 25th. We've just gone through a portion of our sprint planning process. It took a little longer than expected because we recorded a first segment on the fly, putting everything into Axosoft for the Game 125 class. So we're going to wrap that up. We're probably going to meet on Monday to do the rest of that, and also to make sure
Monday's
that
Memorial Day.
maybe Monday, sometime this week, or not this week, next week, to finish that up and make sure that the expectations that we're outlining in the sprint planning line up with what Doug and Daryl want to see out of the game. So I'm Donald Shepard, the project lead. Over this week, I worked on the grid, which one is it? One. The grid one terrain, so I did a quick terrain paint, placed down some meshes, just so that way we had a nice starting area for our character to spawn in, so that way we could show it off for the build review. And over this weekend, I'm probably going to be working on trying to, a lot of the questions we have about what things, the exact specifics of certain things, like, working on the survival system and things like that, getting answers out of Doug and Daryl so that way we know what direction to move on with that, and then taking the spreadsheet we made for what the Axosoft tasks are going to be and converting it.
Alright, Frank, game and system design. Last week I traced out the airfield for Roswell Army Airfield, and this week I have been measuring each line and angle and doing the math to scale it all back down and creating a paper map on a very large sheet of graph paper. That's what I've been doing.
Marcos, design. This week I worked on finishing up the user stories, as well as working on textures for the environment in the current build. Next week I'm going to be working on an additional 2 textures, as well as working on models to import into the game.
I'm Kylie. I am an artist on the project. As of last week, I worked on compiling reference photos of native foliage that will be found in the area, so that way this week I can begin modeling and texturing it for the project.
Hi, I'm Travis. I'm lead designer. This week I've been mostly doing user stories, and some other onboarding stuff, and I was doing a bit of research for texturing in Unity and for brushes. And this week I'm going to actually start doing that and adding in the terrain and the trees and the grass.
My name's Charles, lead programmer. This last week, mostly worked on getting the build done up for the milestone review, and then helping Garrett with the player controller moving forward, continue work on the player controller, and then just making sure all of the other programmers are set up to do what they need to do for the coming sprint.
Hi, I'm Garrett, game programmer. This past week, as Charles said, kind of worked on the character controller and started the Cinemachine, except I got stopped about halfway through the week because room consolidation, so I had to clear out by this weekend. And what I'm doing next week is learning animation software and how to make and process raw animations. Nothing's really standing in my way besides consolidating to a new room.
Zachary Worrell, programming. This past week I pretty much just focused on learning about interfaces and going over of what would be required in an inventory system and getting the basics of that done.
Wyatt Dooley, former lead for Dawn of the Dreadnoughts stuff. I'm now in gray area because they no longer need me. I was doing management stuff for programming. Now I'm just doing the event system for gray area, and nothing's holding me back.
And to clarify, because Wyatt made that sound really bad, the reason he's swapping back over is because he wants to do production work for us, and he's helped. Him going over to Dawn of the Dreadnoughts was to help them get to a point where it's actually their online guys really stepped up, and Wyatt got them to the point where they were actually able to move forward on the project, and they didn't need somebody giving them a lot of direction. And since that was the case, he's now able to come back over to us and actually do the thing he wanted from the beginning, which is just straight production work. Which is somebody who's been in a lot of lead roles because no one else would take the lead role. I understand that desire quite well. Ariana is continuing her work on the airbase model. Joseph is going to be continuing his UI work. And Deshaun is going to be probably working on figuring out more of the crafting system. So that way we kind of, if we can get a little bit of work done on that before we actually get to that sprint. As well as probably he's going to be doing some work placing assets in the crash site. I think that'll ultimately end up being the lion's share of his work is actually building the crash site itself that the player's going to start in. So that way that's not more work that's going to be on Travis as far as that's concerned. And that's pretty much it for the stand-up.
Good.